Alrighty. Hey guys. This is the part 4 of the Create a 3D Character series. Um, thank you for showing up. Very much so appreciate it. And to anyone who is watching this later, thank you as well. And if you were only able to, kind of like go through this process kind of asynchronously, um, just let me know if you need any help. I know that there may be some people that won't even see this for another, month or something like that. But if you need any help, feel free to reach out. I'm Sam. I am a creative experience public technology assistant, or something like that, some long title. But basically, I work at Creative Experience. I bounce around to all the locations. We currently have 3. Our first location, Central, the downtown library on Olive. The bar library also has a creative experience, and that is the one on Jefferson. And then the newest and most improved one, which I'm currently in right now, is Julia Davis. We have our fancy new recording studios here. We even have 2 of them at this location, so it's a really nice location to check out. Plenty of computers, super great time. If you ever have anything that you need help with, feel free to either email us just at the regular Creative Experience email, which is CEXP@slpl.org, or if you need like specific help about this program, feel free to email me, and that is SBEEHLER@slpl.org. And I can also, I usually will send out some things to anyone who's participating in this, so you'll probably have my email already. But yeah, let's kind of get into it. So I'm gonna get started here. So today we're mostly going to be just finishing up our anything that we need to finish up, and kind of talking about the process of what you need to do for each kind of use that you have for your 3D model. So let's share the screen. Okay, and hopefully everything's all right. And oh gosh, started moving it around, and I hope that's okay. All right. Should be good. Let me grab my notes real quick. Okay, so this is what I have after last time, and I kind of showed you a little bit of a preview of some of the texturing that I was working on last time, but I had just done a little bit of the flat work, just putting the colors on rather than doing any like detailed texturing. So I'm going to kind of dip our toes into both of those. So what is texturing? So texturing, rather than like adding like a grit or a feel to something like it would be on a physical object, texturing is basically what it looks like. So it can be anything from like the color that it is or what texture it looks like. We're not going to get super in depth with that one, but I am going to kind of like talk about the process for that. We haven't done a lot in any of the other tabs. We've mostly done the layout tab and the sculpting tab. This time, we're going to be talking about UV editing, texture paint, and shading. And some of them will be used a little bit more than others. Some of them are only used there for a second, but they're all kind of just a little bit important for texturing things. So why would you want to texture something? So if you're 3D printing something, there is no reason. The only reason that I could really think of that you would want to texture something that I kind of talked about last time is if you just want to color block it in to kind of plan what you want to do for when you 3D print your model and when you paint it or something like that. So the texturing process is mostly going to be for animation, or if you're just making renders of it. So like if you are just making your 3D sculpture to then render out an image so that you can produce like artwork that way, or prints or something like that. Essentially like a painting or photograph, but it's just a photo of your model. So if you're doing that, you'll want to texture it, because otherwise it'll just be flat color, like a gray color. Animation, same thing, you'll want it for that. If you're going to be using it for some kind of like online avatar or something like that, if you're going to be using it in game production, anything like that, you're going to want to texture it. Another reason that you might want to texture it is if you get really in depth on texturing, you can technically bake a texture into your object. So if you have, there's certain like add-ons that you can get and ways to do it. I haven't done it a ton, but you can, instead of sculpting something to look, you know, like if I wanted, for example, if this dress was going to be fuzzy, like have like a, like almost like a Sherpa or like a carpety kind of texture, that's just like the easiest one that I could think of. You could go in with the sculpting brush and make it look that way. There's also ways to take your texture and bake it in so that it kind of adds that texture physically to the mesh. There's a couple of tutorials that you can find on how to do that. I usually prefer to just go in with a sculpting brush and do it. And one thing is, if you're like, well, I don't want to have to do it all by hand, you don't have to. So if you go into, I usually do draw or draw sharp, you can go in and change the texture and use a specific brush. So you can change out what the brushes are. So I've done one where it's like a fur or a hair texture that just makes it bumpier, like in a way that, you know, it would be hard to do on your own, or it would take a long time. But let's go ahead and talk about texturing really quick. So this is where right now we're in this viewport shading where it's just our matte cap. So it's just a plain gray material. When you go into the next section, this is going to be what it would look like, showing you what the colors are. Well, if you look over here on the right-hand side, under the material properties, which is pretty much all we're going to be in today, that's this kind of circle in the bottom right-hand corner. You can see that there's not any textures in here. So what I would do if I wanted to add one is I'm going to click on the dress and click new. It's going to take a second because this is a very large file because I have all of my examples in here. So it'll show you right here that it just made a new material. So if you were setting up a brand new material, you can change the name of it in here. So you'll just double click to make it so that you can change it. That's just to keep organized. Otherwise, you can just leave it. The most simple ways of doing the texture, if you're just doing flat color, it's a smooth texture. Like this dress, I'm like, I don't want anything on it. I just want it to be just a color. So then you can just go into base color and change that to be whatever color you want it to be. I think it was like an orange or something. And then there's a bunch of different settings in here because what it starts out with, the default option is called a principled BSDF, and that's just the name of the kind of material that it is. So if you click in here, you can see there's also other things. Like there's kind of like pre-made glass shaders or glossy or hair, and they all kind of like work in a specific way. The only time that I will usually change, I usually don't change the actual type, but what you can change is these little slots right here. So where it has these like different colored bullet points, if I were to want, say, this shirt right here, in my example picture, it was kind of like a striped shirt. And obviously, if I'm just doing a base color, I'm not going to be able to get that. So what I could do instead is go to base color, the base color right here, and change it to image texture. And now you'll see that it turns black, and that's because there's no image in there right now. So you'll click open, and I think it was this, the trendy striped. And you'll see that it doesn't really look like much, it just looks like it's a flat color. And that is because we have not unwrapped this object. So if you're just doing a flat color, you won't have to unwrap anything. So I can actually go through, and I have all of these done already. So I'm actually just gonna go in and set these just so I can kind of show you what this looks like. So if you're just doing a flat color, it's not something you're going to have to unwrap. So what unwrapping is it makes the computer understand how you want this material to look on here. So right now, it's not unwrapped. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to have the item selected and tab into edit mode. I have no idea if you're supposed to select them all, but I think you do. You do, because I've just started doing it differently. So you do have to go ahead and select all of the vertices. So to select all, you just click A and it'll select them all of the ones in this object. And you'll go up to this top button here, do UV, and then you have a couple of options. If you have a very simple object, you can just click unwrap. If you have kind of a complex, messy object, like I do right now, like none of these are in line with each other. They're all just kind of sculpted and molded into the way that I want them to be. And that's okay for some circumstances. So what I'm going to do, instead of just saying unwrap, because if I say unwrap, it probably won't do exactly what I want it to. So you'll see that it's got all the stripes in there actually. You can see the stripe pattern that I put, but they're all twisted and like gnarled into each other. And that's not what I want it to look like, though that is a very cool pattern. What I'm going to do instead, and this is just kind of like the cheat sheet to make it look nice, especially if you only have an object that is seen from one angle, is project from view. So now you can see that it actually displays the stripes in the way that it's supposed to. So this right here is not exactly how I wanted it to look though. It's a little bit, or maybe let's say I want the stripes to be a lot thinner. What we can do is we will then go into UV editing mode, and I'm going to put this in the same view as the other one. Oops, not that. And you'll see this is the texture that I imported. So this is the image. So I didn't have to create this image. I just like went on one of the free image websites. I'm not sure if this one's from Pixabay or Pexels, but it's just a place that you can get free textures or free pictures at all. And I just uploaded it straight to here. So now what you can do is you'll see these are all of the vertices that are on this side of the screen. I will just select all of them, and then I can just size this up, and you'll see where it's actually laying in comparison to over here. So if I'm like, oh, I really want this to be a whole lot thinner, I can just keep going like this. And it's okay if it extends past the image. The only thing is when you extend past the image, you'll see if I pull this over here. I actually don't know. It might be a perfect image, so I might not have to deal with that. But the only thing about it is, yeah, I think this actually might be a perfect repeating pattern. If it's not a perfectly repeating pattern, you'll be able to tell because, you know, on the edges here, where the things are like not connecting, you'll be able to see that the pattern is broken. But this is a repeating pattern, so we don't have that problem. So that's all good. And then if you're like, okay, well, I want to, for example, I want to go in and add just a couple of random dots to my mushroom hat. So you're like, I don't just want it to be a red hat. I want it to be with the mushroom dots on it. So what you do in that case, you're not going to necessarily find an exact image that's going to be the texture that you want. So now you can do a texture paint to make your own texture. So what we're going to do is I'm also going to go ahead and unwrap this one, but I'm going to do this one a little differently because this hat is seen in all angles and it's at a tilted angle right now. So if I did project from view, it would not look right. So I'm going to do this the proper way this time. And thankfully, this is a pretty, this is what good geometry would look like. So you can see that these are all lined up. It's a little iffy right in these corners, but for the most part, it has a perfect alignment and it looks nice. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to show you how to mark a seam. So this, for Blender purposes, for 3D modeling purposes, if I just went and said unwrap to this, and I went to the UV editing, it just unwrapped it in like a very odd way, right? You can see it's just a bunch of like squares. So it actually just stacked all of these squares on top of themselves. That's not what we want. So we have to kind of give the computer an idea of like where to actually cut things out. So we're kind of making essentially what would be the same as like making a clothing pattern. This is much simpler though in 3D. So I'm just going to select this round, forget the exact word for this, but the connecting vertices, this loop, thank you, got it. And the way that you can select a whole loop at once is instead of just clicking on it, you will click Alt and click on the line at the same time. And it'll select that whole loop. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to say UV mark seam. So now when I unwrap this, and I go to UV editing, you'll see that it has these two circles. And if you go over here and you just select this top, you'll see, oh, okay, well that's this part right on top. So that means that I can freely paint this bottom section differently than I would paint this top section, and they're not going to be on top of each other. So now that we've got this unwrapped, what we can do is we will go to texture paint. So that now we're going to get going on this texture paint for the hat. And we're going to click new. And these settings that it gives you are just, you're setting up what that picture is that's going to affect this hat. So the same way that we just imported an image that had the stripes on it, now we're just going to make an image to import. And you can do this in an outside program if you'd like. You can do this in like Photoshop. If you're doing something super detailed, it might be easier to do that. For the simple stuff that we're doing for this character, I'm just going to do it in Blender. So I'm so bad about labeling these, but I'm just going to call this hat. I usually will just leave it at 1024 by 1024. If you want to boost that up, that's just going to be helpful for making it a more detailed image. But I'm just going to keep it the way it is and click OK. So now we've got this black image, and we're going to go to Image and Save As. And so I've already done the hat, spoilers, but I'm just going to call this one Hat 2. And basically what I'm doing is I'm saving this image in the same place that I have my file so that they're all together for if I need to use it in another place. So it's really good to, while you're working, have everything in like one folder. And if you don't, that's totally fine. There's also, and I can show you a little bit later, there's a way to just combine it so that these things are stuck in the file. It does make the file a little bit bigger, the blend file, but you gotta do what you gotta do. All right, so hat 2, and I saved that. Now we can go over to this hat material, which I did not name. And right now it is just this red color or orangey red. But I'm going to go to that base color dot again, say image texture, and then open hat 2. So now it still looks black, like we don't have anything there, and that's just because we haven't started. So if we go in. I'm going to select all of these so that I can see where I'm working on. So you can see right here, this. I'm just going to start marking, and it marks right there. So it might be a little disorienting at first to be painting over here and see it coming out over there. That is totally fine. You can also just paint directly on the object, which can be super helpful for getting in like the tiny details that you can't really visualize. Another thing you'll see is if you paint just from this top angle, you'll be like, oh yeah, this looks perfect. And then you kind of go to another angle and you'll see, oh, that's a lot longer than I thought it was. So you might want to kind of, while you're painting, go back and forth between the different angles. At the top here, you'll see that you have two colors. You have white and you have black. If you click on the color, you can change it to any other color. If you want to quickly switch back and forth between the two, you can just click X, and it will go back and forth between the colors that you're using. So basically, you can go in here and you know, make your dots in the places they're supposed to. I am not being very precious with this because I've already actually made the hat texture. But basically you can go in, add your dots where they need to go. And it has very simple tools. So again, if you want to have any sort of like really direct control, you might want to try doing it in another program. And the way you would do that is if you go to UV editing, and you have all these selected, you can export this image with these dots intact. So it'll kind of give you a reference of where you're painting on. Sometimes though, I will just like block everything out in Blender. And then if I want to do tiny details, then I'll save this image, pull it into another program and work on it. Like say, for example, I am like, okay, I want all the dots to be here, but also I want there to be like text all around the little dots or something. You should take that into another program. They just don't have that option here. But it has draw, soften, smear, clone, fill, and mask. And then this is just for notes. I really only ever use fill and draw. Soften you would think you would use a lot, but sometimes if you have a really detailed file, it just slows your computer down and it doesn't work that great. One thing you really need to remember, and I have done this a million times, forgotten to do this a million times, while you're working on this texture paint, this image is not going to update in your files. So if you go to your files, you'll see it is still a black image. You have to save the image. So if I click save on the file, that is not going to save the image. Oh boy, okay, there we go. it got a little slow there for a second, got nervous. That will not save the image. So I save the file and you think, okay, I'm all done, I'm gonna close out. You could have just been painting for an hour and now it's gone. What you have to do is you go to image, like you're in the texture paint, you go to image, and then you say, I usually just click save all images, because that's just gonna save any, if you were working on 4 different textures, they're all gonna be saved now. So now I've got this. And now if you see like, oh gosh, you know, I was being really messy down here. I really just want this to be black, but I don't want to have to be really gentle around the edges. You can just go in and do it on this. So like doing really larger sections is nice to do over here. Another thing you can do is, let's say, for example, you wanted, so one thing we didn't really talk about is, so we've got the colors and all that, that's what this base color is. There's a bunch of settings down here for metallic, so this is what's going to make it look like reflective, like gold and silver and stuff. Specular, which kind of just like is how the light is reflected. So even if something is glossy, with like a roughness, so you say like you turn this down all the way, you can actually see the world texture is showing on here. So this is turned up all the way, but the specular, if you turn this down, it just means like it's not reflective. So it's just absorbing all of that light. Even though it is reflective, it's absorbing light. So, um, and it's kind of hard to see on the lighter colors, but it's doing the same thing on there as well. But say you really want this top part to be super glossy, but you don't want this bottom part to be glossy. So what you can do is, I'm gonna actually just pull this up for a second so I can get to the bottom, is I'm gonna just select all of this part. Whoop. So I've selected all of this bottom part here. What you can do is you can actually, on the same mesh, have more than one material. Um, so let's say I'm like, okay, I added a plus sign here and I added new, and I'm like, okay, I just want this bottom part to just be white, and I want it to be matte. I don't want it to be glossy at all. So I'm gonna turn the roughness all the way up, and right, it's not changing. That's because right now it's still assigned to this number one. So we have this selected, we'll click assign. And now you can have two different textures that look totally different on the same object. Obviously that's gonna be much easier to do on a clean mesh. So this one just like has really good geometry, like I was saying, rather than if I tried to do that on the shirt. Now this mushroom looks totally crazy and not like how I designed it, but that's okay because I did make it the correct way. So I'm going to, I think we're good on those two things that we were talking about. So I'm going to kind of pull in here the flats version of what I did. So before you go to pose your character, I would suggest you can do all of them. You can do all of the materials before you do the posing. And sometimes it's even better because your character won't be stretched out in any kind of weird way. But for this purpose, I just kind of filled in the flats. So once you've got all of your texturing done, now we're going to move on to something that should be relevant to pretty much anyone that makes a character, and that's going to be rigging. So rigging is basically adding a skeleton, a computer skeleton inside of your mesh. So this is your mesh, you know, all of these, your whole character is your mesh, and you're going to add your armature. So it's kind of like what you would use for like a puppet, you know, like it would be like strings or, you know, whatever you would use to make your puppet move. Oh, sorry. I did not see this message. Do you have to paint the dots or can you place perfect circles? That is a great question. So in Blender specifically, they just only have painting tools. So they only have those couple of tools, the like paint, bucket, and smear and those kind of things. Like I was saying, I like to just block it out in Blender so that I know where things are in that 3D space. And then you can export it to a program that does have the perfect circles. One thing I like to do, technically, we do have a program at the library that you can that has a lot more options. I just haven't used it a lot because it's kind of complicated, but Adobe Substance Painter, I think they have a lot more tools for painting on your object. Another option is if you have an iPad and Procreate, which we don't have here at the library, but well, we do have some iPads. I'm not sure if they have Procreate on them. That's something I might try and get us to get on them. It also allows you to paint directly on them, and it does have a lot more settings than, because it is a drawing program, it has a lot more settings than it does in Blender. All right, so now we're going to talk about the rig, right? So you can absolutely rig this yourself. I hate doing that. It is very tedious. And it's kind of a long process, even with the automatic armatures. So if you were going to do that, you would say add, and then armature, and it gives you, oops. And it gives you like a little bone here, and then you can go in and add all the bones that you'll need. I think there actually might be, I think there's an add-on that gives you a human-shaped armature to start with. Um, but if you're just getting started, I would try using Mixamo or Mixamo. I'm not sure how to say it. And I'm going to go into another window to kind of show you what that looks like. I'm not going to be running a full Mixamo uploading and all that, just because it can be a little bit of a long, just like a waiting process, and I don't want to waste any time. So I'm going to open this up. Okay, now you should be able to hear me. There we go. I know it always does that when I share the Chrome tab. So this is Mixamo. It is owned by Adobe, but it is free, which is very surprising for them. But it is an online resource where you can either use a pre-made character of theirs, and then like test animations on those, or you can click Upload Character, which you have to sign in. Hold on, let me log in really quick. Okay. And I have no idea if it's going to load my most. Oh, yep, it does. Okay, cool. I don't have to do that upload process. Perfect. So I've already got my character in there. But if you were using one of their characters, you would click here somewhere on the characters tab. But what you can do is during the upload process, you have to upload either an OBJ or an FBX, I think. And to get one of those, you'll just have to export it that way from Blender, which I can show you when we hop back in there. But I've uploaded my character already. So the process of uploading, basically what it does is you click upload, and it says, hey, please, put your file in there. You'll click your file, and it'll load for a couple of minutes. Definitely take some time. And basically what it's doing is it's trying to understand where the different parts of the human body are. And then it'll ask you to just put some pinpoints on the model. So it'll ask you where the chin, the elbows, the wrists, the knees, and the groin are. Maybe the feet too, I forget. But it'll ask you where all those points are. And then it'll also ask you if you would like, second. We have someone in the waiting room. Me admit. And it'll ask you if you want to have something that has finger movement on it. I always leave that on because why not, It just makes it have more bones in the body, and that's all. So I've got my character in here, and I can basically click on any of these animations after it has done it, and you can make your character move in whatever way you'd like. So this is nice for speeding up any kind of animation that you're working on, especially if you're doing something that like requires a lot of background characters doing things. It's nice to have these pre-generated animations. So I will usually look for just a static pose, because right now I'm just going to be doing this for the purpose of printing, for 3D printing. But so I'm just going to go with idle. I guess that's going to be animation no matter what I do then, huh? I think if I do pose, there we go. So one thing you can easily do is you can just download it as a T-pose. And you'll think that, well, I already have it in a T-pose. Yes, but it will have the bones inside of it already now. You can also, if you already are like, I know what I want my pose to look like, you can just pick a pre-made pose. If you're like, I really want my character to be doing this, yeah, no problem. You can do that. And it has a couple of settings here for like how wide your character's like arms are. So if there's things like a hat in the way and you don't want it to be as dramatic, you can kind of pull that arm space down. And then when you're done, you just click on download and it will give you that file back. And then, let's see. Okay, and so that's kind of it with Mixamo. Then when you download it, I will show you how to import it into Blender for something that is useful. Alrighty. Okay, so now I'm going to go over to Blender again. Uh-oh. It is not registering Blender as an option. Oh, there it is. Whew. Okay. So now, what I would import it, the way that I would import it is I would say, and this is the same for exporting. So if I were to want this character to be uploaded to Mixamo, I would say File, Export, and then either FBX or OBJ. Either one is fine. That they accept either. And one thing you might notice is your materials when you import them. So you do import, and when you have just downloaded it, should be an FBX, or I think it downloads as an FBX, no matter what you do. But you'll import that. You may notice that it is missing a texture or your textures look wrong. Because you've already made them, you can still go in and change them. So like hat, I could change to the other hat version or whatever I want to do. They'll still be in your file. So now I'm going to, here is what it looks like when I imported it back in. So I actually went in and I chose a pose. Actually, this is not exactly what it looked like. There we go. So it'll look like this. So you'll see the armature inside of it. So if you're like, oh, I really like this, but I really wish she was, her head was facing forward, that is no problem. You've got this bone structure in here now. So you can go into pose mode. And I usually like to not have it in the color mode because you can turn on X-ray and actually see where the bones are. But if you're like, I just really want her head to move to face forward, you can click R to rotate the same as you did when you were modeling. And I'm going to rotate it on the Z axis so that now she's facing forward. One thing that you may notice, and I've already gotten rid of them, is if you do download an animation, and I think sometimes even if you just download a static pose, at this bottom timeline here, you might see I'm going to actually put one here so that you can see it. Maybe I won't if it won't let me. Oh, it is right there. You'll see like a little diamond right here, and this is a keyframe. So if you have two keyframes, or if you have any keyframes at all, if you don't apply the keyframe, it will not listen to you. So if I rotate this head and then I go to another area, it doesn't apply. So what I will usually do is I will just get rid of the keyframes if I'm not animating. But you can definitely find tons of tutorials on how to use keyframes for animating. It's really nice because in comparison to cell shading, cell animating, you don't have to do the head here, 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 here. You just do the starting point and the ending point, and then any kind of flourish you want in the middle. So it's kind of nice to cut corners a little bit. But yeah, so if you wanted to do any changing of the pose, here is where you would do that. I had to do that on the hands, on the fingers. They were a little weird. I kind of made weird hands, so I don't blame the computer. Another thing that you will notice, and I actually want to undo this because I don't like her facing forward. To the right. There we go. Another thing that you'll notice is you may have some clipping of your textures. So if you're printing this, it's not a huge deal, but what you can do is go into the sculpting tab, and I like to just kind of adjust that material a little bit. So I can now go into that, and you'll see that now I'm just blowing up using the inflate tool on the shirt, just so that the shirt's a little bit bigger. And this is going to look better, obviously, for something where you are either printing it or just rendering an image. It just may have to be something where you mess with how the weight paints are. So if you're making the rig from scratch, you'll have to also go in and do weight painting. I could probably talk for 3 hours about all the stuff you have to do with weight painting, but basically, just the simplified version of what that is. Let me see if I can find the, I think it's trying to see where exactly you get to the weight painting. I forget exactly. But basically, it is adjusting how much the bone affects the places around it. So if you were, for example, if you were making a character that was like a doll or something, you wouldn't want there to be a lot of elasticity in their joints. So like if you see like how my wrist is very curved, if it were like a doll wrist, you would want it to be like completely like sharp at the edges. And so basically you're just adjusting how much it's affecting itself. So there's a ton of really cool weight painting tutorials on YouTube. And so if you're having trouble with how it looks exactly, especially when it comes to animating, I would definitely try and check those out. Or you can always book a Tech Connect and we can kind of like go over your project in particular, like in specifics and everything. Let's see. Okay, so now that I've gotten this in the way that I want it, I am going to, and I also have a version of this where I actually put all of the painted things on it. I don't know why it's not letting me. My bad. There we go. Okay, I definitely have, oh, I don't know why it's all the way over here. There it is. So this is the completely posed and painted version of what I was working on. So you can see I have flat textures, I have painted textures, I have stuff that's more glossy, I have stuff that's rougher, I have imported pictures here and here. It's posed, it's all that good stuff. I did originally have it over here on top of this because I was just going to mention, so this pose that I have here, if I tried to 3D print it, it would probably print okay, but it also wouldn't stand on its own. So what I did is I just made a little base that is just made out of just a skinny cylinder. And I'm just going to print it with the base attached already, just because I think it'll look nicer and it'll stand on its own. So this is obviously for something for printing. If you're not printing it, you don't have to worry about the stability. But I think that's pretty much it. Oh, a couple of things that we didn't get to cover yet is the shading tab. So we didn't really go over the shading tab. The shading tab is just a very detailed version of this materials tab. So if you go into a material that actually has some things on it, let's see, maybe this one. Yeah, so the hat has a photo texture. It's called Untitled. This is not a great word process, but you'll see here that I added the image here, but you can also add it here. So if I wanted to add an image, I would do Control or Add, and then I usually just search in here image texture, and it gives me this, and I can go in and add a texture and just hook it right into the base. So this is actually the face texture, but you can kind of like go back and forth with whichever textures work for you. Oh, and I actually accidentally combine those in a really cool way. I didn't mean to. But this is what you do when you're doing a lot more complex stuff, because you may also need to do, say, a normal map. And you can do some things with this, but what I usually like to go into the shading tab to do a normal map. Now, normal maps, unless you're doing this for the computer only, you won't need them. But a normal map is basically what saves your computer a ton of energy. So instead of going in and modeling a sweater texture on this dress. I could go get a sweater height map or a bump map or a normal map, any of those kind of things. And I would then, and actually I can go just grab one right now. I usually use the website 3dtextures.me. There's just a ton of free ones, and I always end up going back to that website. So I'm just going to pick a random texture, and I'm going to grab a normal map so that you can see what it looks like, because sometimes it's hard to kind of visualize what I'm talking about if it's not actually here. So I'm going to download that really quick. And you'll usually know that it's a normal map because it'll usually be blue or purple or pink. It'll be a very like neon color. And I think that's just how the computer reads it. So it's still going to be an image texture. And you'll click open, and I put it right here. It's actually a fur texture. And I have this, but you don't want to plug it directly into the normal because you'll see that this color option is yellow and this normal option is like a bluey purple. So you'll want something to connect the two. I'll add in a normal map and I'll connect the color here and the normal to the normal. And now I don't know what this is going to look like. It looks wild, and that's because we did not UV unwrap this one. I'm just going to quickly UV unwrap from the view so that you can see. So now you can see that even though we have a base color that is just this color, like we didn't change the color at all, it looks like, I mean, it's not convincing because of the pose, but right here especially, you can see it does look like it is three-dimensional, like it is sticking out a bit. So that's used a lot for like flooring or walls in games where they're trying to save some polygons. So they may just put a little bit of texture on it, and then they'll put this normal map so that when you're walking around, it looks like it's three-dimensional. So like if I rotate, it isn't. Like there is no difference in the mesh, but it gives like a good appearance to it. So that's for normal maps, and you may want to use normal maps if you're doing something that is super textured. So like this actually looks really cool like that. It looks like a little grass dress or something. But if you're doing something that's going to have like a rougher texture, like maybe I could have done this out of like burlap or something. I could go get a burlap texture from that website, and it just adds that extra dimension to it. That's really nice. But yeah, so that is pretty much it. I want to make sure that I leave a couple minutes at the end here to kind of talk about it. Oh, actually, right before I open it up for questions, I do want to show how to submit things to us if you're doing a 3D print. So the same way that we were exporting before to export from Mixamo, you'll select your object and you'll say export and then STL. That's the kind of file that we accept. And then you should be able to like open your file again, like open the STL and look at what it looks like. If you have any sort of like Windows computer, should have like a 3D viewer on it, just so you can double check that you like submitted the right item and stuff. Because I've definitely selected the wrong stuff in my document and it didn't look right when I printed it. I was like, oh, that's not what I asked for. But let me open up. And it muted me again. There we go. So I'm on the St. Louis Public Library website. Now that's slpl.org. And you'll go to Creative Experience. And if you need to book a Tech Connect with somebody, that's where you can click right here to fill that out. Here's all our events. Here's our lovely program that we're in right now. And then you'll see this section right here. And the first option is already 3D modeling, so it's our 3D printing, so it's already here. And what you'll want to do is click on online form, and you'll fill this out with your information, your first and last name, card number, email, phone number, any way we want to contact you, the color filament that you want, so what color we're going to print it in, where you want to pick it up. And then in the comments, if you participated in this program, feel free to put that in there because that means that your print will be free. Otherwise, if you have anything else that you want to put in there, like if you want to say, I usually suggest if you're printing a character, definitely print it at either 0.1 or 0.05 detail. We already do 0.1 as the default, so you shouldn't have to put that in there. But if you also, I will say Blender, no matter how accurate you think you're making the scale, it's not going to be accurate. It always comes in at the wrong size from Blender. I don't know why. It just does. So I would also in the comments put how big you want this thing to be. I usually just say like one of the dimensions for reference, like I want this to be 6 inches tall. Then that's no problem. We'll make sure it's scaled up, you know, accordingly. It's not going to just be a bean pole that's 6 inches tall. We'll make sure that it's, you know, in the right dimensions and everything. And then you'll just click upload your file. You'll put your STL file, agree to the printer policy, and click submit. And that's all you got to do. That's pretty much it. So yeah, and now we have about 5 minutes left. If anyone has questions, feel free to ask them. Yeah, and thank you again for stopping by. And I think you should be able to unmute yourself. So you can either unmute yourself or put it in the chat, whichever one is easier for you. Should be all good. I've never done 3D printing. What color filament is best? That's a great question. So if you're going to leave it as is and not paint it, I would say make sure to not pick anything that's too vibrant or white or black. Usually those ones just like you can't see the details as well. So like orange and black are just kind of like hard to see the details. If you're going to be painting it, you could really do it any color. I personally, and I actually don't think it's on the 3D request form, weirdly. I'm going to get that updated, but you can always put that in the comments section. We do have a silver, which is, it's not super metallic looking. It's just kind of more like a gray. I really like working with that one just because it's easier to, it's a good base color to start with. If you're going to paint it though, white should be fine. Really any color is fine. But I would say probably either our silver or if you're not going to paint it and you just want it for displaying, then maybe like a blue or a red because they're not super bright. Because sometimes that just looks a little odd. Unless the thing is supposed to be that color, then it's like, oh yeah, that makes sense. But yeah. Any color should be fine, just depending on what your project is. Yeah, no problem. All right, guys. Well, that is pretty much it for this program. Thank you so much for attending. I really appreciate you guys stopping by for all of them. Again, if you have any questions, please email me. I'm more than happy to talk about 3D modeling all day. So thank you for participating, and I hope to see you guys come in sometime, and I hope to hopefully receive a couple requests on the forum from your characters. All right, thanks guys.